It's time to think about planning for taxes for 2020 and 2021. Joining me to talk about it is Raphael Tulino with the IRS to talk about all the things you need to know about right now so you don't get a surprise tax bill next year. Hi, Raphael.
Thanks for having me as always. And we can talk about some holiday planning for sure.
Well, we should. But before we get there, let's talk about, the pandemic has caused so many things to be upended in our world. Job losses, unemployment, a stimulus tax credit, all of these things happened this year. How are all of those COVID-19 unexpected events going to impact taxes?
Right, and 2020 has been anything but normal, and you'll probably see some interesting situations on your tax return. So probably a good idea, because of all of what you said and what we'll discuss here, to make some adjustments now if you can, while there's still some time, so you can see the effect on your 2020 taxes when you file them beginning in January of next year. So you mentioned the stuff that could affect people. Obviously, the pandemic adversely affected a lot of people. The CARES Act came along and provided a lot of credits for business, for example. It also brought the economic impact payment, those stimulus payments that many millions of Americans we all got for the most part, depending if you were eligible, of course. And that's not taxable. That was basically an advance credit on your taxes for next year you got early in sometime here in 2020. But the bottom line, there's the CARES Act to kind of consider as well, as a lot of folks were unfortunately affected by the pandemic. Also in the CARES Act was the unemployment. Unemployment, if you got that, the $600 a week for many weeks, that is taxable at the federal level generally. So what that means is when you get your taxes back, unless you had taxes withheld from that, as people normally don't for unemployment, then you may see a little more of a bill than you normally do because you didn't withhold on that unemployment as you normally would for a salaried employee, or for example, if you're self-employed or work in the gig economy, you make quarterly estimated tax payments. So there's those two things to consider. Job loss is also important. Your income can go up or down. Other things you can think about is effects like childbirth or getting married, that kind of thing. If you bought a home, if you refinanced a home, all those different things can all come into play. So bottom line is not a bad idea to consider some tax planning, considering all those events that could happen to you throughout the year, and doing so now and seeing the effects of it in the next 3 or 4 weeks that could give you a few extra bucks in your pocket to spend. And that way you have it for your holidays, as opposed to waiting for a tax refund, which could come to you later on. But then you're waiting for that for days and days and weeks, as a lot of people are this year, because this year has been anything but normal and we're limited in terms of our staffing.
When you say they should look at what their tax implication is right now before the end of the year, what does that really mean? Do they adjust the amount of money that they give to the IRS? What does that mean?
Right. So the IRS has a withholding estimator. It's a tool on irs.gov. And based on all of what you just said, and your situation, my situation, our situations personally as families and individuals, you can go to this thing and enter your information into this tool, and it'll give you an idea of the amount of tax you may owe at year's end, and give you an idea if you need to adjust, use a new Form W-4, maybe pay a little bit more before year's end. That way you pay as you go as you're supposed to. Because if you took a deduction or distribution from your IRA, like you said, and that 10% penalty was waived for going over this year, that might add to your income. That's still taxable. The unemployment is, job loss, big change, adversely affected by the pandemic. All these different things that are out there that affected you. Yes, the withholding estimator on the IRS website is kind of your key to go wrap that up and see what you can do to put yourself in a better situation.
Right. Another interesting thing that happened this year, horrible for a lot of Californians in particular, is the wildfire season. How do wildfires impact your taxes? Is there a break? Is there something that happens because of that?
Right. Good question. We had 2 disaster assistance FEMA-based relief news releases that came out, and both of them basically just postponed deadlines. And so if you are affected by the wildfires directly, perhaps you hadn't filed in 2019 yet, and you took an extension of time through October 15th. That extension is now all the way into January, depending on the fire that you were affected by. There were fires in August and September. So that's a good point, too. You have those extension of deadlines if you were affected by a wildfire per FEMA, per what we put out, that information on irs.gov. So those extensions are available for those people who are affected.
I know the IRS itself has been affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic in terms of your staffing and the amount of government employees that have been processing all of these claims and tax returns, especially in the midst of all of this. And I have had some messages from people saying, I'm still waiting on my tax return. Is that a thing? Are people still waiting on tax returns?
Generally speaking, yeah, anything but normal here in 2020. So back in late April or late March or April into June and July, the IRS is pretty much shut down because of COVID. So as we got back to doing what we're supposed to do with limited staffing, opening many, many millions of pieces of mail, if you mailed your tax return in by paper the old-fashioned way, perhaps you're seeing a much longer delay than normal. And we apologize for that. But at the same time, asking for patience to understand that we'll get to it as soon as we can, considering the abnormal situation we are in 2020 that we're in here. But the bottom line is e-file, direct deposit, paperless returns are the easiest, simplest ways to go. But yes, we're still trying to get through a backlog. We have limited staffing and doing the best we can with our resources, considering the time we're in.
The last thing I want to touch on is something that I have actually done a couple of videos about, because I know how hard it is for people, especially right now. And that is the tax fraud schemes that are out there. People trying to steal from Americans who are desperate right now. And they are doing that under the guise of the stimulus. And that's how people are giving away their information to these crooks. So tell me a little bit about how that works and what you guys are seeing at the IRS with that.
The latest variation on that is a COVID-19 Treasury Fund text scam. All right. So this is by text. Now, normally I would tell you, and this is true, under no circumstances the IRS going to email you out of the blue, no random threatening phone calls for sure. And now we're seeing texts, and this text scam comes around, shows up, it says, you have $1,200 from the COVID-19 Treasury Fund. You need to provide us with this information. And it's going to be bank account routing, kind of personal intrusive kind of stuff. Leads you to a bogus website. Looks like the IRS has you entering that information. We're not doing that. It's a scammer using the IRS as a lure. That $1,200 carrot, if you will, because that $1,200 is legit. That's what millions of people got. Times two or more, depending on your situation, of course, from the economic impact payments. But those text scams are bogus. The best thing to do is ignore them. No, the IRS is not doing business that way through random text. You can forward it to phishing with a PH at irs.gov by taking a screenshot of it and then emailing it to us using that address, phishing at irs.gov, and note the time and the date and that kind of thing. And we could look into it and see where they're coming from. But the bottom line is no random texts, no random phone calls. Delete them, just ignore them, and understand it's not the IRS doing business. It's a scammer using the IRS as a carrot, so to speak.
All right, Raphael, there's so much to do. We're only a few weeks away from the end of 2020. Hopefully, 2021 is going to be much smoother for all of us, including you guys over at the IRS. Good to see you. Thank you so much for all this information.
Thanks, Lisa. Have a great day, and thanks for having me.